The flashbulbs had barely stopped popping when Claire spotted the ice sculpture, a frosted monstrosity shaped like the company logo, slowly pissing itself into a bowl of overpriced shrimp cocktail. That's how she knew the night was going to be expensive. And fake. And exactly what Jordan would have drooled over. She stood near the ballroom's entrance for a moment, clutching her clutch like a weapon, chin high, in a sea of botoxed executives and their sequine plus ones. Heels were murder, her stomach was an empty drum, and her smile could have sliced glass. 12 years in this company, and she could still play the part better than any of them. Better than Jordan, even if he ever bothered showing up. The place was crawling with money. Oil money, tech money, old money trying to smell like new money. Tables labeled with little gold placards, one for every tier of donor, like a wedding for sociopaths. Claire's table was right up front. $50K table, courtesy of their company's latest PR stunt, empowering tomorrow's innovators, which translated roughly to distract from internal layoffs with champagne and hashtags. She slipped into her seat just as the string quartet modulated into some Coldplay monstrosity. Alan Drake was already there, salt and pepper suit that probably cost more than her mortgage, looking like he ate Forbes covers for breakfast. Claire hadn't expected him. She kept her smile neutral. "Miss Weller," he said with a courteous nod. His voice was calm, but there was something predatory behind the eyes, something patient. Big night. She didn't blink. Bigger for the checkbooks than the children, but sure. Alan's lip twitched, almost approvingly. "I take it Jordan's not here yet?" Claire fought the urge to sigh. "Jordan's never here yet. He's a man of entrances." "Or exits," Alan said, sipping his water. The table filled slowly with CFOs and CMOs, and one insufferable socialite who kept calling Claire Catherine. She played hostess anyway, topping up wine glasses, laughing at stale jokes, pretending she hadn't been working 16-hour days fixing supply chain delays, while Jordan posted drone footage of his Italian villa. There was a flicker of optimism underneath her exhaustion. This gala was important, not just for the press or investors or some hollowed-out board of directors, but for her. It was her baby, really. Claire had led the entire event planning side after the external agency bailed, handled permits, sponsorships, even table arrangements. She hadn't slept properly in a week, but the room looked seamless. Like money and power had finally agreed on a lighting scheme. Still no Jordan. She texted him once, "Ida, press asking." No response. Gala officially began with a flourish of saxophones and a generic welcome from the charity director. Claire smiled, clapped, sipped champagne. She was the only VP here tonight. No CFO, no CTO, just Claire holding the brand on her shoulders like a sparkly corpse bride. Alan leaned toward her again between speeches. "I've heard good things about your logistics redesign." Claire gave him a side glance. "You've been spying?" He tilted his head. "Redesigned the warehousing flow to save them 6 figures. I'd call that public knowledge." Claire's cheeks warmed. That project had nearly broken her. Jordan had insisted on launching it in under a month, then ghosted every time she asked for approval. In the end, she ran it solo, took the fall when projections came in late, and got a 3-sentence email of thanks. Still no Jordan. She felt the eyes of other execs scanning the room, quietly registering his absence. Assumed he'd be late. Some knew better. Claire had started to get used to being the public face, even when it came with the public fallout. When the entrees were announced and little nameplates glowed under the centerpiece candles, Claire leaned back in her chair and let herself relax for just 1 second. One breath. She didn't know the knife was already on its way. The steak had barely landed on her plate when her phone buzzed. At first, he thought it was the press contact finally responding about Jordan's no-show. Or maybe the intern she sent to double-check the guest list. Something manageable, something fixable. Instead, the screen stared back with a text that should have come with its own laugh track. "Jordan, you're fired. We're cutting senior staff. Budget issues." That was it. No punctuation, no explanation, no warning. Just a digital guillotine dressed in corporate gray. Claire blinked. Once. Her knife slipped, just slightly, tapping the porcelain plate. A guest 2 seats over looked up, distracted. She smiled like a woman who just remembered the punchline to a joke only she found funny. Then set the knife down with deliberate grace. Her chest felt hollowed out. Not like a punch, no, worse. Like someone had vacuumed out her insides and left the shell intact. She reached for her wine, took a sip, nodded along to whatever Alan Drake was muttering to the CFO across the table. On the inside, something was fraying, tearing at the seams. She checked the message again, still there. No follow-up, no call, 12 years, 2 expansions, a supply chain overhaul, 3 Christmases spent in conference rooms, and this smug little bastard fired her like he was canceling a subscription. She didn't blink, didn't scream, didn't give the room anything to latch onto, because that's what they wanted. That's what people like Jordan counted on, shock suppressing dignity, silence buying them time to twist the story first. So she ate. She cut the steak, chewed, nodded politely at a joke about NFT charities, and clutched the table linen so tightly her nails left crescent moons in the fabric. Across the table, Alan turned slightly. Everything all right? Claire looked at him. He wasn't smiling. She hesitated for half a breath, tilted her phone toward him, low and quick, like a gambler flashing a losing hand. He read it once. No raised eyebrows, no gasp, just a slow exhale, barely audible over the clinking forks and forced laughter around them. Timing, he murmured, is a hell of a thing. Claire swallowed. 12 years. I found out over lamb chops. Alan glanced around the room, then back at her with a different kind of interest now. Not pity, not sympathy. Calculation. Let me guess, he said softly. Budget issues that don't apply to first-class tickets and Montenegrin yachts. She didn't respond, didn't need to. A silence bloomed between them, weighted and strange. Claire stared ahead, her face calm, regal even, but her pulse was skipping like a scratched record. Across the room, a camera flashed. The charity director smiled, lifted her glass, toasted invisible donors. People applauded, money applauded, and Claire sat in the eye of it all, sinking without flailing. She had held this company together with bubblegum and burnout, put out fires that Jordan lit for fun, took meetings in ER waiting rooms, trained every intern who now made more than she did. And in the middle of a gala she helped build, on a night designed to spotlight her team's achievements, he cut her loose via text like a coward who couldn't even finish his shrimp cocktail first. Something inside her shifted then. Not rage. Not yet. Something quieter, colder. A thought she hadn't let herself think before. I owe him nothing anymore. She straightened her spine, angled her shoulders, and smiled at the table's next joke like she wasn't rewriting the narrative of her entire professional life between courses. Alan reached for his water, then paused. Were you the one behind that new logistics streamlining? Claire raised a brow. I was. He nodded slowly, lips pressed into a near smirk. Figures. Didn't say anything else, but he didn't need to. Something was clicking behind those eyes, an equation running in real time. And Claire, sitting there like a porcelain bomb, all smile and shrapnel, began to realize she wasn't the only one adjusting strategy mid-meal. Alan Drake didn't lean in like a man offering comfort. He leaned in like a man reading a map, one that had just rerouted through fire. You okay? He asked again, lower this time, cutting through the jazz and the clatter of dessert trays. Claire nodded once, robotic. Her mouth said yes, but her hand betrayed her, shaking slightly as it reached for the bread she hadn't touched all night. The crust crumbled in her fingers before she even got it to her plate. She didn't look at him, just tilted her phone a second time, brief, clinical, as if she were showing him a parking ticket, not a career execution. Alan's eyes scanned the screen. His jaw didn't move. Something in his posture hardened. A millimeter straighter, a half-degree colder. Was all he said, not oh no or that's insane or how could he. Just a sound filed under observation, not emotion. Claire bristled. She didn't need his pity, especially not from a man who built his empire by eating failing companies alive like rotisserie chickens. Jordan's known for decisive communication, she said dryly, slipping her phone back into her clutch like it might detonate. Alan chuckled, a single exhale through the nose. Is that what we're calling cowardice now? She looked up, caught the trace of something in his eyes, contempt maybe, but not for her. Budget cuts, he said aloud, tapping the table once. That's the line, Claire nodded stiffly. Apparently VPs are line items now. Except the ones buying vintage Ferraris on company cards, Alan said, really hiding the venom behind the veneer. I see. He picked up his wine, swirled it, studied the liquid like it might offer insight into her boss's idiocy. Claire hated how he could sit there so composed while her whole world was crumbling in her lap. He leaned in again, closer this time. Tell me, he said, that logistics overhaul, was that yours? Claire didn't flinch. Every piece of it, from inbound warehousing to last-mile delivery. Alan nodded like he already knew, just needed her to confirm. Impressive. Saved how much? Just north of $800K this quarter. He whistled, quiet and precise. I remember reading about it. Jordan took the credit, didn't he? She didn't answer, didn't need to. Alan's smirk was confirmation enough. He repeated, a little darker now. Claire felt something inside her begin to thaw, not relief, not yet, but the sharp edge of anger finally cutting through the fog of humiliation. He had been loyal, beyond reason, beyond sense. She defended Jordan to shareholders, soothed staff when bonuses vanished, turned blind eyes to shady invoice chains and client meetings that looked a lot like ski trips. She hadn't just worked for that company, she'd bled for it. And he dumped her like expired milk, via text, at her own goddamn gala. She clenched her napkin so tightly her knuckles went white. Alan watched her like a man watching a storm form on the horizon. Funny thing, he said after a beat, most CEOs wouldn't cut the one person who keeps the machinery from eating itself. Claire raised an eyebrow, unless that machinery makes it harder to move certain numbers offshore. Alan didn't react, didn't nod, but something behind his eyes flickered like a lighter catching flame. Around them, the gala buzzed on. The charity director introduced a guest speaker. Tech CEO from Seattle started droning about AI and youth mentorship. The dessert cart wheeled past. Someone at a nearby table laughed too loud. Claire kept her face smooth, mask intact, but the tide had shifted. Alan wasn't just making conversation. He was probing, testing for cracks, not out of kindness but interest. And Claire, still raw, still bleeding beneath the glittering fabric of her dress, realized something crucial. She wasn't useless. She wasn't obsolete. She was a liability to him, to Jordan, because people like Jordan didn't fire you in the dark unless you were close to something hot. Alan placed his wineglass down gently, then turned back to her with a look that was all steel and opportunity. If I were a betting man, he murmured, I'd say someone's trying to clean house before the smoke gets too thick. Claire said nothing. But inside, the temperature was rising, not from shame anymore, from heat, and from the tiny, glimmering thought that maybe she'd just been handed the perfect weapon, not a text, a witness. Claire excused herself with the same composure she might use to refill a wine glass, measured, polite, unremarkable. She slid her chair back, offered a delicate smile to the table, and said she needed a moment to check on the AV team. No one questioned it. No one cared. She was already halfway invisible. The second she rounded the corner into the hall, mask dropped. She didn't go to the AV room. She didn't even make it to the restroom. She just kept walking until the gala's music dulled to a heartbeat behind her, heels tapping a rhythm of rage against the marble floors, past silent corridors and overpriced art. She stopped in a hallway lined with fake ficus trees and vending machines that had never seen use, leaned against the wall, and let the fury come. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over her phone. She stared again at the text like it might morph into something more humane. It didn't. The bastard hadn't even added a period. 12 years. 12 goddamn years. She wanted to scream. Throw the phone into one of those fake plants. Rip down the company's garish banner still hanging near the conference room. Instead, she locked her jaw and paced, muttering under her breath. Budget cuts my ass. She had been in the numbers. She knew the budget, knew where the waste was. It wasn't in senior staff. It wasn't in her. The hallway suddenly echoed with voices, two men, mid-conversation, heading her way from the opposite direction. Claire stepped back into the shadows between the vending machines, not intentionally, instinctively. She recognized the voices before she saw the faces. Liam Prescott and Gerald Kane, two board members, old money and bad cologne. The kind of men who wore legacy like armor and called it strategy. Already signed the damn letter of intent, Prescott was saying, voice thick with annoyance. He's bleeding it out while we toast orphans. Claire froze. You think the buyer's actually going to stay quiet? Gerald muttered, it's a shell, Cayman-based, no teeth, he made sure of it. Prescott scoffed, and you believe that? Hell, I wouldn't sell them a parking space, let alone proprietary tech. He's selling the logistics model. The whole framework. The damn algorithm what's her name? VP Claire something? Claire didn't breathe. She was asking too many questions about the pipeline updates, Gerald said. Not dumb questions either, she was digging. Prescott gave a sharp laugh, so he cut her. He always said she was too loyal for her own good, thought she'd never leave. Claire's skin went cold. And what about the rest of the team? Prescott asked. Someone's gonna notice. He's planning to fold ops under marketing. Call it a realignment. Jesus. Their footsteps started to fade. Claire stood completely still, heart punching her ribs like it wanted out. She wasn't fired because of budget cuts. She was fired because she had gotten too close to the rot, because she knew too much, because she gave a damn. Jordan wasn't just incompetent. He was selling them out, handing confidential systems to a faceless buyer overseas, packaging Claire's blood and bone work like a startup bundle on clearance, doing it behind a smokescreen of charity hors d'oeuvres and photo ops. The rage that had been simmering now boiled over. She had stayed up until 2 a.m. modeling warehouse projections, missed her sister's wedding to fix a failed rollout, lied to her own team to protect his ego, covered his messes, smoothed every wrinkle in the public image until her fingers bled. And now, he was gutting the company from the inside while she stood there, discarded like a used invoice. Claire didn't cry. She'd done that in year 3. What she did now was straighten her spine, smooth her dress, and walk back toward the ballroom like she still belonged in it, because she did. But now she wasn't just a woman holding things together. She was a woman with ammunition. By the time Claire returned to the ballroom, the lighting had shifted. A warmer hue, more golden now, calculated intimacy to grease the wheels of generosity before the auction kicked off. Strings had gone jazzy. Laughter rose thicker in the air, smoothed over with bourbon and backpats. It was the hour where power got passed around in winks and nods. Claire walked back to her table like she'd never left, shoulders squared, steps measured. Her lipstick was still perfect, but something behind her eyes had changed. Gone was the rattled grace of a woman swallowing betrayal. In its place, something still and sharp. A fuse waiting for the right spark. Alan Drake was sipping coffee when she sat down. He glanced over, not with pity, not even with curiosity, just mild, almost administrative acknowledgement, like he'd already moved to the next page in whatever mental file he kept on her. A plate of tiramisu had materialized in her absence. Claire barely registered it. "You were gone a while," Alan murmured, low enough that the others couldn't hear over the crescendo of a donor's speech. "Long line at the powder room," he said smoothly, picking up her fork. "Charity constipation, I suppose." Alan let out a soft laugh and leaned in a touch. "While you were away, I asked our mutual friends here who actually ran your operations department." Claire didn't blink, and they all said your name, no hesitation. She took a bite of dessert, more for the motion than the taste. Her pulse was steady now. Her fury had cooled into a clean line of purpose. Precision was the new adrenaline. Alan slipped his hand into his inner jacket pocket and slid something discreetly under her dessert fork. His card, matte black, embossed. A name that moved money when whispered, handed off with the casual elegance of a man who never rushed. "Let's talk Monday," he said, voice low but clear. Then, after a pause, "or tonight, if you're ready." Claire's fork paused midair. Alan didn't look at her when he said it. He kept his eyes forward, watching the speaker onstage, some venture capitalist who'd made a fortune inventing new ways to advertise to toddlers. But Claire could feel the temperature shift. This wasn't charity. This wasn't small talk. This was offer and opportunity. She didn't answer right away. Just palmed the card, let it disappear into her clutch without a word. But she didn't hand it back either. Alan finally turned to meet her eyes. "I don't like wasting good infrastructure," he said. "Especially not when it's already battle-tested." Claire met his gaze. "So I'm infrastructure now?" Jordan's too stupid to realize what he just unloaded. "I'm not." There was no sales pitch, no PowerPoint, no "let me circle back," just facts. Alan was offering her a door, one she could walk through tonight if she wanted, a door that led somewhere Jordan would never see coming. Claire didn't smile, but her fingers relaxed for the first time all evening. A new voice boomed over the microphone, announcing the beginning of the auction. A round of polite applause. The stage lights brightened. The first item flashed on the screen behind the podium. The moment shifted. Alan straightened in his chair, folded his napkin, and turned his attention forward. Claire watched him, watched the calm calculation in the set of his jaw, the way he was already positioning his bid card like a chess piece. He was a shark, no doubt, but not the frenzied kind. The patient kind that circled until blood bloomed in the water. And tonight, he'd just seen blood. Claire exhaled, long and silent. She wasn't broken. She wasn't discarded. She was wanted. And for the first time in hours, something like power crept back into her bones. Not just the memory of it, the taste of it. She didn't know yet what she would say. But she knew this. Jordan had taken his shot. Now it was her turn. They dimmed the lights like it was a Broadway premiere. Hush rippled through the ballroom as the auctioneer took the stage. A tall woman in sequins and a smile sharp enough to cut through Swiss accounts. The spotlight hit her, and just as she launched into her welcome, the doors burst open. Claire didn't need to look. She felt it. Jordan, she could have picked that entrance out of 100, the way the volume in the room shifted an octave higher, as if everyone suddenly remembered to laugh louder. Jordan strode in like he owned oxygen, hair coiffed within an inch of its life. Navy tux tailored so tightly, it probably cost more than her last quarter's department budget. He was flanked by his PR handler and his executive assistant, both of whom wore tight, frozen smiles and Bluetooth earpieces like they were managing a pop star, not a man hemorrhaging company trust. He didn't look at Claire, didn't so much as flicker in her direction. He laughed with someone at table 2, offered a finger gun to a hedge fund ghoul near the front, and kissed the cheek of a donor's wife in full view of 3 cameras. The narrative was already writing itself. Jordan, generous visionary, arriving fashionably late to support the future. If he had a halo, it would have been LED lit. Claire sat still, cold, not blinking. Alan didn't turn around either. He simply noted the shift in energy like a barometer reading bad weather, glanced down at the evening's auction catalog with surgical disinterest. His pen tapped once against the bid card, rhythmically, like a warning. The first item went up, a custom trip to Iceland, geothermal spas and all. The room buzzed with money flexing its muscles. Claire barely heard the auctioneer. All she saw was Jordan. He took his seat 2 tables ahead of her, smack center, cameras at a perfect angle. He clinked glasses with some venture capital brat, leaned back in his chair like a man who had already won something no one else knew was a prize. The second item, some AI mentorship package, went to a tech startup bro with an ego louder than his cologne. The third was a luxury safari, then a private yacht charter. Paddle after paddle went up like choreographed obedience. Jordan bid once for show. Lost on purpose, Claire could tell. He wasn't here to win anything. He was here to be seen. Alan didn't bid at all until the 5th item. A consulting package, donated by Claire's former employer. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Claire. The package had been her idea months ago. A flashy prize to showcase their expertise in transformational logistics strategy. It came bundled with 6 months of executive-level consultation. Value, $180,000 on paper, but practically priceless if applied right. Jordan had bragged about it during a board meeting. Called it brand synergy meets goodwill. Now it was up for grabs, and Alan raised his card. Claire's stomach clenched. The bidding began slow, Alan against some executive from a rival firm. Then another joined in. The number climbed, but Alan didn't blink. He wasn't bidding like he wanted it. He was bidding like he already owned it and was just charging interest. Jordan glanced over once. Just once. Alan raised the bid again, $220,000. Claire saw Jordan's smile tighten by a centimeter. By $260K, the rivals bowed out. Alan's card stayed in the air like it had a gravitational pull of its own. Sold, applause, polite, confused, some looked surprised, some pretended they weren't. Jordan didn't clap. Alan nodded once and placed the paddle back on the table like a mic drop. Claire felt it then. The shift, the snap, wasn't about the consulting. It wasn't about the kids. It was about posture, about power. This auction wasn't theater, it was blood sport. And Jordan had just been upstaged on his own stage with his own item by the one man who didn't give a damn about his spotlight. Alan turned to Claire, calm as a still lake. Would have been ashamed to let it go to someone who'd waste it. She didn't reply. She didn't need to, because every camera in the room was on them now. On him. Somewhere behind Jordan's glassy grin and frozen cheeks, she saw it. The first flicker of recognition. That this night wasn't his anymore. It had turned. The storm hadn't hit yet, but the clouds were forming fast. And Claire, quiet and unmoved in her chair, was the only one who knew where the lightning would land. The applause was still echoing when the room shifted again, so subtle most wouldn't notice, but Claire did. The laughter at Jordan's table died a little too quickly. His PR handler leaned in, whispering something behind a rehearsed smile. The cameras, which had been cycling between the stage and the socialites in row 1, started cutting wider shots, shots that included Alan, shots that included her. Alan Drake had just purchased a service package designed and branded by Claire's company, a prize wrapped in her work, her strategy, her blueprint. And he'd done it under the full light of Gala scrutiny. In front of Jordan, Claire sat beside him in full view. That wasn't coincidence. That was a declaration. She didn't speak. Her heart thudded in her throat, and for one painful second, panic tried to rise again, muscle memory of humiliation, of betrayal. But it stalled mid-ascent. Something else had taken its place. Awareness. The rules had changed. This wasn't about gala optics or press photos anymore. It wasn't about check writing or donor flattery. It was a duel. Alan had just drawn first blood with a bid card. Claire watched as Alan reached for his water, his expression unreadable, his breathing calm, not triumphant, Controlled, Jordan, 2 tables ahead, clinked a glass for toast that no one reciprocated fast enough. His smile flashed too quickly. His jaw tightened on the fade. Claire's eyes narrowed. Alan didn't need the consulting package. He had a billion-dollar logistics arm of his own, 3 patents pending, a private think tank that made federal contracts sweat. Buying that package wasn't for gain, it was for symbolism. It was Alan Drake saying, "I trust Claire's work more than I trust your entire C-suite." It was Alan Drake saying, "She belongs with me now." The auctioneer rattled off the next item, but no one at their table was listening. Even the air had changed. The scent of roses and champagne felt heavier somehow, thick with anticipation. Maybe it was just the weight of power-shifting chairs. Claire's hand rested lightly on her clutch, fingertips brushing the edge of Alan's business card inside. She didn't take it out, didn't have to. Its presence was enough to remind her that her career wasn't over. It was already being rewritten in real time, in gold lettering, with better lighting. The woman seated on Alan's other side, a banking VP with highlighter hair and diamond wrists, leaned toward Claire during the lull. "Quite the evening," she said with a thin smile. "You two certainly stirred things up." Claire smiled, all teeth and grace. "We're just enjoying the auction." It was a lie. They weren't enjoying it, they were weaponizing it. Claire scanned the room. Faces were shifting. Small details changed, postures straighter, eyes darting more. Executives whispering with new urgency. A hedge fund manager she'd known for years suddenly gave her a respectful nod instead of ignoring her entirely. Jordan noticed it too. He straightened in his seat like a man losing altitude, spoke to someone at his table with just a little too much emphasis, forced another laugh that landed flat. Claire could practically see the calculations spinning behind his eyes. He was trying to regain control of the narrative, but it had already slipped. Claire leaned in toward Alan. "What exactly do you plan to do with that package?" Alan looked at her, unblinking. "Haven't decided." "Give it away." "To whom?" He smiled, but only slightly. "Someone who knows how to use it." She felt a slow current rise in her chest, something deeper than pride, sharper than validation. Vindication. 12 years of invisible labor, of being overlooked, overridden, erased. Now she was sitting next to a man rewriting the boardroom conversation without lifting his voice, and doing it with her name in the subtext. Jordan shifted again. Claire caught his eye, didn't look away fast enough. That was the moment she felt it, the reversal, the delicious tilt. Not all the way, not yet, but enough. He had made her invisible, and now, in front of donors, executives, cameras, and every smug friend he brought to this parade, Claire was the gravity in the room. Alan raised his glass. "To strategy," he said quietly. Claire touched hers to his, and to execution. Neither of them drank. They didn't need to, because the real toast hadn't been spoken yet. But Claire could already feel it brewing, and it tasted like revenge. The ballroom lights flared brighter as the auctioneer stepped aside and gestured toward Alan with a lacquered smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the evening's top donor, Mr. Alan Drake." Applause thundered, as expected. Half genuine, half reflexive. No one wanted to be the one not clapping for a man who just dropped $250,000 in the name of youth innovation. Alan rose smoothly, not rushed, adjusting his cuff like he had all the time in the world. His stride to the podium was slow and deliberate, as if each step had been choreographed by an assassin with a tuxedo budget. Jordan glanced over from his table, face fixed in a diplomatic smirk. His eyes, though, were tight. Claire didn't breathe. He'd heard Alan speak before. A few conference keynotes, a panel or two. He wasn't a showman. He was the kind of speaker who made you lean in instead of back. Cold, surgical, effective. Alan took the mic, paused, let the room settle. "I won't take up too much of your evening," he began. "You've already heard from half a dozen very well-dressed people with very impressive words." A few laughs. Claire heard none of them. Her ears were ringing. "I've had the privilege tonight of contributing to a cause I deeply believe in, not because it looks good in a press release, but because it reminds us what real investment is, people." Polite nods. Alan's eyes swept the crowd, then landed on Claire, dead center. "And speaking of people, I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone in this room." The silence dropped like a trapdoor. She didn't come here tonight for fanfare. She didn't expect applause. Frankly, I think she expected to fade into the background after 12 years of carrying an organization that somehow forgot what she was worth. Claire's chest froze. Gasps rippled. Chairs shifted. Alan continued, voice smooth as polished marble. Claire Weller redesigned her company's entire logistics strategy, tripled output efficiency, cut operational losses in half, built the system from the inside out with spit, spreadsheets, and sleepless nights. His eyes moved back to the crowd. For that, she was discarded. Tonight, someone whispered audibly. Somewhere, a flashbulb popped. Alan didn't stop. Let me be very clear, he said, voice harder now. When a company throws away that kind of talent, it's not just a mistake. It's malpractice. Jordan's table was frozen. He hadn't blinked. His wine glass trembled at the stem. Alan smiled thinly. So I'm correcting that mistake. Effective immediately. Claire Weller is joining Drake Systems as Executive Director of Strategic Operations. The room exploded. Cameras lit up like slot machines. Reporters scrambled mid-bite. People turned in their chairs like a tide change. Claire heard someone say her name out loud with a question mark on the end, like they were just now realizing she'd been here the whole time. And Jordan choked. Not metaphorically. The man physically choked on his Merlot. Had dribbled at the corner of his mouth as his PR handler slapped him on the back, wild-eyed and whispering something panicked into her headset. Claire stood up. She hadn't meant to. It just happened, her body rising like it remembered how to before her brain caught up. Like dignity had muscle memory. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just stood there, face calm, back straight, as flashes painted her in a wash of white and gold. Name echoed from at least 3 directions. Alan didn't say another word. He nodded once toward her, stepped off the stage, and returned to the table like he'd just ordered dinner, not detonated a corporate grenade. Claire sat down slowly. The woman beside her looked stunned. You're going to Drake. Claire finally let herself smile. Apparently, she said softly, I already did. Jordan was still coughing. The room had turned. Not against him. Past him. Weren't interested in the CEO with the yacht and the disappearing budget anymore. They were interested in her. And for the first time in 12 years, Claire Weller didn't feel like a supporting character in someone else's company. She felt like the headline. The gala ended in a haze of handshakes, hollow toasts, and frantic texts behind clutched phones. Jordan left early, claiming food poisoning. Anyone within 3 tables had seen the wine splatter on his collar and the way his face drained when Alan said her name. His PR handler ushered him out like a body being wheeled offstage. Claire didn't chase the exit. She stayed. She watched the last paddle go up, signed the charity's thank you card with a steady hand, and walked out into the humid midnight air without looking back. By 1:15 a.m., her resignation letter was written. It wasn't angry, it was clinical. She attached the screenshot of Jordan's text, the one he thought would disappear into her silence. Then she added something else, a summary of her findings from the past 3 months. Dates, transaction IDs, suspicious vendor chains, export logs that made no sense unless you were trying to offload proprietary IP under the radar. A copy went to the company's legal team, another to the board, and one, anonymously, to the Financial Crimes Division. She clicked send at 1:38 a.m. Then she turned off her phone and slept until noon. By Monday morning, the sky had cracked open. Jordan was suspended, indefinitely pending internal audit. 3 board members resigned quietly. The Cayman buyer backed out before the ink dried. An emergency shareholder meeting was scheduled before lunch. HR released a statement about restructuring challenges that sounded like it had been written mid-panic in a stairwell. Stock took a 9% dive by close of day. Claire read about it while sipping coffee at Alan's downtown office, legs crossed, her phone lit with a dozen unread media inquiries she had no intention of answering. Alan hadn't said a word about the fallout. He hadn't needed to. Instead, when she arrived that morning, dressed sharp, early, with every trace of the old company scraped clean from her soul, he led her past reception, past the boardroom, past his own corner suite to a new office, one with windows that didn't face other buildings, one that overlooked the skyline, one with her name already etched in brass on the door. I figured you'd want the east light, Alan said casually, like they were discussing curtains. Claire stepped in, touched the desk, ran her palm across the polished wood like she was confirming it was real. She didn't say thank you, not yet. That would come later. Not when she was still too full of fire, of cold, clean closure. Outside the window, the city moved on, horns blaring, emails flying, another Monday in the chaos machine. But inside, everything was still, like the room had been waiting for her. She sat down, crossed her legs, and opened her laptop. There were systems to audit, departments to rewire, old ghosts to outpace. But for now, she opened one last tab, found the article. CEO Jordan Madsen under investigation for breach of fiduciary duty. Insider whistleblower credited the comments section was already a war zone. Claire didn't care. She just scrolled down until she found the image, the one snapped at the gala, seconds after Alan announced her hiring. In it, she stood beside him, back straight, expression unreadable, the camera catching her mid-breath. She didn't look vindictive. She didn't have to, because she wasn't just someone who got fired. She was someone who flipped the knife and walked away while the building collapsed behind her. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.